invisible to the author. So, hello everybody out there in UK Crime Bookland. This is just a test to see whether you can all see us at the moment. I'm here with Kate Simants to talk about A Ruined Girl.
Hello,
hi everybody. If you can tell us a bit about the plot, please, Kate.
Sure, yeah, okay. Well, A Ruined Girl is, it's from the point of view of two very different people. It's a probation officer who is trying to work out what happened to a girl who went missing a few years previous to the beginning of the story. So that's sort of told in the present, in the present tense kind of thing. And then you've got a much younger protagonist called Luke, who is friends with the girl who goes missing, and so that story is told from the time when this disappearance happened. It's one of those stories that's quite hard to encapsulate without giving too much away, but it's
isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, it's basically somebody who has a investment in a missing persons case when she's supposed to just be the probation officer of the person who was imprisoned for his part in a robbery that just preceded that missing persons case.
Yeah,
I think
that's a good one. First question for me is, why was the title changed from your initial title?
Okay, well, so yeah, the book was originally called The Knocks. As often happens with a novel, especially a novel that's written, I think, not under contract. So when I first wrote this book, I wrote it speculatively entirely, so without an editor's input. And the idea of, so my probation officer is a woman called Ren. What she does is she works with this guy who has to. He's in this sort of restorative justice scheme, and he has to go around knocking on the doors of all of the people who were affected by his crime, essentially. And so the scheme is known colloquially to the probation officers as the Knocks. And so, but I also liked the title originally because it sort of felt like, like the School of Hard Knocks and all that kind of stuff. But when it came to putting the book together, so I think you probably can see the cover on the screen there. But so they couldn't work out a way of having a cover that went with the idea of the story as well as the title, because those three things really have to come together.
Yeah.
And without basically just having a door, there was no way that the design team and stuff are all involved, and and they kept sort of sending things to and fro, and they were just like, this is just not working, because the door. It was a design thing, really, a lot of it, and we just decided that it said more about the story to have it, have the girl who went missing, Paige, as sort of front and foremost in the title as well. So it felt like it jumped out a bit more as well. It was kind of it said more about the story. So that's kind of what happened. But it felt very strange to change a book's name like that late in the day, because the other couple of books I've written, they've stayed with that title like the whole way through. So, but I'm not precious. Like, I don't particularly mind changing things, so that was fine with me,
really. When it came to probation, why was it that subject which appealed to you so much?
I think I wanted some distance between the crime and the story that I was writing. So I wanted to kind of look at the long tail of a crime, like, rather than it happening, the investigation happening as we went along, trying to work out who was involved and, all that kind of stuff that you usually get with a police procedural. I kind of wanted to see what a crime looks like years after it happens. And I wanted the characters that are involved in it are still very affected by what happened years later. And so I was interested in the idea of a cold case, but I also it gave me the opportunity to look at it from the point of view of somebody who had gone to prison, had experienced everything that you need to experience in the sort of justice system, and still be keeping secrets about it. So yeah, it was that really. I mean, I'd met a few probation officers sort of in the development stages of this book, and I was just fascinated by the kind of characters they were, because they're not the kind of people that I would have expected. I kind of thought they'd be like really tough and no nonsense and, you know, and stuff like that. And like one of the main probation officers I spoke to in the research stages of this book is now a teaching assistant at my son's school, and she's the gentlest person you'll ever meet, you know. And I just found that really interesting, that you can bring that kind of huge amount of empathy to your job, and you know, it's not just about kind of, I think probation officers sometimes get a bit of a bum deal in fiction and, you know, in TV and films and stuff. They're kind of, you know, very, you know, it's a bit like in The Clockwork Orange, you know, the probation officer in that film, in that book, is, you know, absolutely relentless, brutal kind of person, you know, just kind of just a complete sadist. And I wanted to show some humanity to that job, basically.
Yeah, I know you've done an article on books around probation. What was it like researching other people's books on the same subject?
Yeah, I mean, that was tough. That was a tough article to write, actually, because it was a top 10 books about probation that I did for The Guardian back last summer, I think it was. And yeah, it was hard to fill those slots. I've got to be honest. Like they were not all books that I'd come across previously. So yeah, it was. It's not glamorous. You know, the world of probation is not the kind of thing that's covered very often. So yeah, it was interesting to read the way that. I mean, actually, I'm trying to remember what those books were actually, but a lot of the one of my favourite ones was this crime writer out at a moment called Trevor Wood, who's a friend of mine, and he's got a wonderful probation officer in his book, and she's just marvelously no nonsense, and you know, she's just all kinds of fun. And I just, I was kind of interested in like I said, like the humanity of, you know, the way that loads of different people are bringing different styles of justice to what they're doing. But I guess it's, in a way, really, it's only the same as, you know, with police officers. You know, your police officer, like the police officers I've known in real life. I mean, I've known a lot of police officers because I used to work in police TV shows like Crime Watch and stuff like that. Like they all sort of share a certain, you know, they're quite it's a serious job, right? So they're coming at it from quite a serious point of view, and as an outsider, which obviously I was, you know, they want to make sure that you know that they're taking it seriously. They're not mucking around, you know, they're not like, you know, they're not wasting time. They also have the same kind of there's a shared sense of humor, which I've always really liked about the police, but I haven't, because I don't know that many probation officers, haven't really been able to find that thread, like that common thread. So I'm making it up, basically, which I guess is what everyone does.
That's a good start to most novels, making it up.
Yes.
I was interested in knowing how you first met Trevor, because you're on the same university course, weren't you?
We were, yeah. So we both did the first year of the UEA, so University of East Anglia crime fiction course. When was this? 2015 to 2017. So yeah, like 4 years ago we graduated. And Trevor was you know, I don't think he'd written fiction before. He was a playwright. And yeah, it was obvious right from the beginning we were very different writers. You know, he's very funny. You know, I'll always put some gags in, but my books tend to be quite they're not sort of humor based. And I think he's an amazing kind of creator of character. So it was that was such a great course because we learned so much from each other, I think. He's been a big influence, and we're still friends now. We kind of proofread each other's stuff and, you know, give each other feedback quite a lot. So yeah.
So how collaborative was the course then, would you say?
It depends on the writers themselves, to be honest. So some people, like I say, you know, I'm not particularly precious. I'm always very keen to take on criticism and, you know, and if anyone's got ideas that they think would benefit the story. I have ownership of it, and I very much know my characters, and I know the things they wouldn't do. But where things, if I'm, because we submitted like 10,000 words at a time over a course of 2 years, and if people were coming back, if I had like 5 or 6 people coming back and saying the same thing, some particular plot point didn't work, or something was rushed or something was too slow, then I'd very much take that on board. I'm personally, I'm willing to take criticism, like I say, but I very much was, would drive my story forward, and I think most people were like that. Some people don't really like taking that sort of stuff on board, which is kind of an interesting, it's an exercise in knowing your audience in a way. So some people are submitting 10,000 words at a time, and they don't really want to be told what's not working. Some people are just sort of, partly doing it because they just want, they want the support, and that's fine too. Obviously you do these courses, you pay for them, you should be able to get out of them, what you choose. I personally think it's really important to be told what's not working and be able to take that, because I don't think you can develop as a writer unless you listen to what's going wrong. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say the finished product of my book was like based on everybody else's ideas, but I was certainly shaped as a writer by those experiences over those couple of years.
Was it a similar experience when you were doing Afraid of the Light, with that kind of short story idea?
Yeah, I mean, so that's the short story anthology that we've got 2 out at the moment: Afraid of the Light and Afraid of the Christmas Lights, which is the second one that came out in December, and we're working on another one now. So there's I'm trying to remember how many of us there are in that, between 12 and 15, I think. We are all, I think we're all published novelists by the time we kind of got involved in that anthology project. And we were all, so we're basically just a group of friends who, kind of decided that this would be a good idea to sort of put out a charity anthology. And it's raised a lot of money for charity, actually. We're really proud of that. It's not been collaborative in that, because they're such short stories, obviously they're kind of, I think that those ones were like maximum of 2,500 words. They are, we draft them, and then, when we'd finish them, we'd say, okay, I've got this finished, and anyone want to swap? And then we'd swap, and then some people would, there would be a few tweaks, do you know what I mean? But rather than, it wouldn't be like massive changes, or somebody giving you a completely different direction to go off it, because they're quite self-contained. You have to pretty much have the whole story before you start writing a short story, I think, because otherwise they get, they need to be quite controlled. It's a completely different discipline, and I hadn't had a great deal of experience with short stories for I had written some quite a long time ago, but before doing those anthologies, I'd sort of very much concentrating on longer format stuff. So it was and continues to be quite a brilliant experience, actually, getting that kind of feedback from some really incredible voices in crime fiction. It's I'm very lucky to be involved in that.
It must be enjoyable. But when you had the previous career as an undercover journalist, I bet you didn't think that you'd ever do that, or was that always a plan?
To write?
Yeah.
I've always been, I did a degree in English literature when I was, when everyone does it, 18. Really, because I like reading. I didn't really have much of a plan about my career at all at that point. And I'd written bits and pieces over the years, but without really kind of having a plan to be a writer. But just kind of, I don't know, if you read as much as that, I think it's inevitable in a way that you kind of consider doing some writing. But I wrote scripts and that kind of stuff. So there was definitely a lot of writing in my job as well, and writing up kind of treatments for story ideas and that kind of thing. But it was my 27th, I think it was my 27th or 28th birthday. I was working on a police show, and we were with Oldham Police, actually, which is, I think, up near you, and yeah, we were sort of following this police team around, and we got a call at me and this other producer got a call at sort of 5 o'clock in the morning, and our police liaison was like, you need to come out now because we're going to come down, and there's a guy who's committed suicide, and they wanted us to kind of go along and like film what the police were doing when that happens. And it was the morning of my birthday, and I was there thinking, this is not useful TV. This is I just, it felt intrusive. It felt it wasn't kind. It didn't feel beneficial to anybody or respectful at all. And I just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. And so from that point, I basically started looking for something else. And I considered various different things actually. And a friend of mine said, why didn't you do a master's in creative writing? And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. So I just kind of did some, freelance work while I was doing this master's. That was a previous master's, so I've actually done two. But that was my first one, which I did at Brunel University. And yeah, never looked back really. I mean, obviously it's been quite a slow process to get to this point, but had other jobs and children and all that kind of stuff. So I forgive myself for my pace.
Yeah. What you say it's a slow process, but what would you say you learned from between book 1 and 2?
I've learned about pace, I think. I think so. Yeah, my first book, Lock Me In, which I'm proud of this book. This one. I worked on this book for a long time, and it had some. It had so many incarnations. This one, it had like the final version. I mean, you can see it's kind of fairly. Well, it's like 400 pages long or something. Like there was a version that was 600 pages, something ridiculous, and and 2 other character voices in it, and it did get really out of control. But I think when I was writing A Ruined Girl, I was like I say, working kind of and sharing chunks of this writing as I went along. Whereas with Lock Me In, I kind of did it in a vacuum. And I think even if you're doing it very much as a kind of amateur, which to be honest, when I was writing both of these books, I was pretty much an amateur writer then. It's really useful to be sharing it as you go, because then you can kind of pull yourself back when things aren't working, rather than waste another 100,000 words and keep going down a path that you're only going to end up cutting anyway. So yeah, there's that. Yeah, I start doing a lot more dialogue as well in my second book, because I just think it keeps the pace going a lot better, and it's much better for building character than sort of telling the reader, what someone's thinking or feeling. It's much better to demonstrate it. I mean, it's the first rule of writing is show don't tell. But yeah, so I've learned, sort of matured a lot in terms of what I think is, knowing that what I think is interesting isn't necessarily what everyone else thinks is interesting. So I have to make sure that I've got a very clear, a very clear trajectory for every chapter. So I need to make sure I've moved things along with every paragraph really. So yeah, pace is probably the main thing that's changed, I think.
Is that why you split the narrative between the 2 characters in the chapters, do you think?
See, I do that because when I'm reading myself, I find that it keeps my attention better to be reading from 2 different points of view. In terms of the timelines, I don't know. As a reader, I've always kind of enjoyed that more, because I like the sort of diverging paths and the converging paths and stuff, and and seeing, I just think there's something more satisfying about spotting the clues that maybe are years apart. So yeah, that's why I think I did that with The Ruined Girl. But partly because I wanted to have these 2 very different characters, and they're very different ages as well, so it kind of made sense to have them telling the story from different timelines.
Yeah, there were lots of different angles, and as you say, with different ages, it must have been a challenge to separate the 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think because so the two protagonists in A Ruined Girl, you've got Ren, who is a probation officer in her late 30s, and she's got a past of her own, obviously, and but she's sort of settling down and starting a family, and she's at a very different stage in her life to Luke, who is the other protagonist, who's teenager, lives in a children's home, and so the voices. I didn't need to work very hard to. I mean, they were separate already. It wasn't like writing two middle-aged women. They were very, very different people, which is also something I wanted to do. I've read too many books where you've got two voices that are far too similar, and that's that doesn't do anything to kind of break it up and keep the pace going. It's just like you need to always know. I think you need to be able to open one of those books and read one line, even if it's not dialogue, and know for certain, without having seen the chapter heading, who it is that's talking. And if you can't do that, then the writing needs a tweak. But yeah, so with Luke, my teenage protagonist in A Ruined Girl, I think I probably liked writing him more. I liked his anger. He was very kind of rough around the edges, but he also he struggled to communicate very well, and I just kind of had a lot of fun kind of getting into his mind. Yeah.
It said in the research that you got a lot of it from undercover in care homes. Is that how much did you learn from that? Is it kind of
all of it? All of it. I mean, basically, all of the research about children's homes that's in A Ruined Girl was from first-hand experience of working in children's homes. So, I mean, I say all of it. Obviously, I've read around it as well, but having, and also, some sorry, a second. Some friends of mine when I was a teenager were in foster care and children's homes as well. So having kind of, and I was from a very kind of different background, sort of fairly sort of standard like nuclear family, and having seen the way that their lives were different, so sort of teenage Kate is sort of still there talking in my brain, kind of reminding me of what my experience was firsthand then, but also my experience of being working undercover. I think I hadn't really, before I did that undercover work, I don't suppose anybody would particularly think about children in care unless you had a personal reason to, and it's a pretty shocking lifestyle. I mean, you imagine how important it is to be able to go home at the end of a hard day at school, or you got trouble with your friends or your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever it is when you're a teenager, to be able to go home to a safe environment and close the door and all of that, and know that you're safe and loved, and whatever happens there will always be people there to look out for you. Like we take that, most people take that for granted, absolutely take it for granted, wouldn't even consider that that maybe that literally will not be there one day. And these kids, they don't have that, and what they specifically, I think one of the roughest things about being in care is that that when you're 17, 18, you are done. Like you leave care and then you are on your own. There's no parental support through university if you get to go to university. There's no, like, if things go wrong, if you can't afford your rent one month when you're 25 and living in a bedsit, there's no kind of backup. And that's terrifying, so you're kind of creates this adolescent adulthood that these children are absolutely not prepared for. And I kind of wanted to look at that and really kind of delve into that and sort of demonstrate that as best I can, because obviously at the same time it's not my story. I haven't been in care. I have close family members who have been as well, so I'm closer to it than I might be, but it's I think it's a from a fictional point of view, it's a very rich vein of experience, but it's also something you don't read much about. You read about it in young adult novels and middle grade novels, because there'll be a sort of thread of foster care or adoption or whatever in those kinds of books, but and it's a classic theme, isn't it, in children's literature of not having parents, so not having that stability. But it's not something you come across a huge amount. in adult fiction. I just think it's really interesting to give
Yeah.
those children some kind of agency of their own as well.
No, I haven't read much about it in crime
No.
fiction, to be honest.
Yeah.
The theme as well with the brothers and the relationship there must have been interesting to write that dynamic as well.
Yeah, I mean it was. So you've got yeah, I've got these two brothers that I know. I mean, I know very little about brothers because I don't have a brother. But that sort of sense of these people, you know, not really being able to communicate what it is they want because they've not been given the tools somehow. There's this kind of, I don't know whether, you know, it's toxic masculinity kind of thing where, you know, it's not okay to talk about how you're really feeling, and that, you know, the trouble that they're both going through, you know, the deep sadness that they've got about their family falling apart, their mum being in, you know, she's in a mental hospital, and while the main thrust of the story is taking place. And yeah, it's I wanted to sort of dig around and see how these two young men kind of you know, manage to sort of communicate with each other when they, you know, really what they want to say is I love you, and I'm, you know, I'm trying to help you, but they can't somehow find those words, and so it all just kind of falls apart. And I just yeah, I was interested to see. I'm interested to see how men talk to each other generally. I think it's fascinating.
It is in
fiction
because you don't see it often. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the formal communication as well between agencies and people looking after them. Interesting. You covered that quite well too.
Sorry, say that again.
The formal communication between agencies and people that are looking after them. You covered that with the probation officer and
yeah. And so there's the kind of I've got, you know, the structures of you know, of Ashworth and the younger brother Luke. You know, so Ren kind of, you know, has these various pressures at work, and, you know, people that are trying to you know, force her to kind of rush through these protocols with Rob Ashworth, the guy who went to prison. And you know, yeah, I kind of I wanted to show how that process would work, because we don't really have, I mean, you know, the system that I've got in place here, this restorative justice system, is kind of a composite of various ideas of, you know, sort of community justice and stuff like that. But you know, I was sort of interested in the way that might work. But so obviously it's kind of, a lot of it is made up.
It was quite although it was differently structured. I have studied it myself, and it was quite, I understood where you were coming from it. So not that different from the reality, I don't think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to. I do think it's really important to. I mean, not just because you don't want people writing in saying probation officers would never do that kind of thing, but it's really important to represent, you know, whatever it is you're representing. You know, it's important if you don't know it firsthand. It is really important to get the research right, because, you know, you don't want to kind of mislead people, even though obviously it's fiction. That, you know, the background has to be solid. I think that's especially true when you're dealing with something like so in Lock Me In, my first book, there are, oh, I nearly completely spoiled it then. There are specific mental illnesses that I deal with in that I, you know, I think, you know, it drives me insane when people just kind of like chuck in a bit of like amnesia or mental illness or whatever just for the sake of a plot point. I think it's really important to represent it fairly and without demonizing anything.
When you were looking to in paperback, is the cover going to be any different? Because you've recently released it in paperback, or is it?
Yeah, no, it's in paperback now, actually, and it is. I was just going to see whether I have any under my desk. I don't, but no, it's identical. Yeah, it's just a bit smaller. Yeah, I was quite thrilled to have a hardback. Actually, I wasn't expecting that to happen, and my editor was just, you know, just phoned me up and said, "Oh yeah, we've decided it's gonna start off in hardback." And I was like, "Oh really?" It's just so cool to see it there. I mean, to see anything in print is a bit of a thrill, frankly, especially when you've been doing it. I think I've been writing for, oh, I don't even want to think about it, 7 years or something before I, like, as in, really trying to like properly write novels and get them published, before Lock Me In was published. So it was a long haul. So seeing anything in print in any cover, it's very exciting. Waving them around and using them as doorstops.
What book would you say that you would rather read instead of using it as a doorstop?
What, of mine or of any
Yeah.
books?
What would you read yourself that you like to reread? And yeah.
Let me think. So I mean, the books I've recently finished, I finished We Begin at the, I know everyone's talking about this, but We Begin at the End is one of my favorite books recently. It's been the character in that story is just something else. I just love it. The Duchess, her name is, the main character in Chris Whitaker's book, and it's won like buckets of awards and stuff like that. So it's not particularly imaginative idea. Oh, hey, this one's great. I'm just finishing reading this, The Prison Teacher. Can you see that one? By Mim Skinner. And it's just, so I did quite a lot of research into prisons because, obviously Rob Ashworth in A Ruined Girl was just coming out of the prison system. But this book, again, I think this is the theme through what I'm interested in as a reader. It's the humanity, like I think it's very easy to sort of think of prison as just, this kind of big farm of like terrifying characters, but it's, I think especially because Mim Skinner's book is all about a women's prison, and women tend to go to prison for very different reasons. So yeah, I was I mean that's non-fiction, so yeah, I'll definitely be dipping into that quite a lot. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Russian literature, which sounds really pretentious actually when I say it like that. But they're doorstops, which I love, like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. Those kinds of people, the masters of great fiction.
What is it about doorstops that you like? Is it the length of story, or is it the fact that you can get into a universe?
Yeah, I think especially with the Russian stuff, it's like it's so weighty, like it's so serious and heavy, and there's no rushing. They know exactly what they want to do, what they want to tell you, and how much they want to hold back. And there's it's that kind of, I don't know. There's no I don't think there's any consciousness in in some of my favorite Russian novels. No consciousness of the reader. It's almost like they're just like, I'm telling this story. There's nothing collaborative about these books. It's not. Then you wouldn't find them sort of, sort of thinking, oh, but that might offend that part of my readership.
Yeah.
I better take that bit out. As people like Hemingway and greats like that. Even though he's very frankly rightly been kind of demonized recently because his the way he represents race and stuff like that is horrific. It's of its time. It's also horrific. But he's there's no kind of holding back about the stories that they want to tell. They don't
Yeah.
They don't care. They don't care what you think of their story. And I just think that's really, in a way, it doesn't sound refreshing, but it really is. I mean, it doesn't sound refreshing after 800 pages, but to me, after sort of loads and loads and loads of psychological thrillers, and then going back to Tolstoy or whatever, like that's one of my favorite things to do, to sort of come out of the crime world.
Yeah, sounds really interesting. If I wasn't listening to it generally on audio, I might give it a go. But
no, that'll take
a bit
hundreds of
long
years to listen to.
Yeah. I was just thinking about your former career, and because I've just finished When I Was 10 by Fiona Cummings, and I thought when I was doing the research for this, that you might be able to write something of similar experience in like tone. Have you ever considered doing that?
I haven't read that, but when I was 10, that's I know I keep coming across it. Tell me about that one.
It's from point of view of a journalist looking into what's happened to a friend's family after
Right.
after they were one of them was murdered the parents and they've gone hidden away,
Right.
and she's been tasked by a journalist colleagues to look into it basically.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've always got, I suppose, I don't think I did so much in Lock Me In, but in the book I'm writing at the moment, there's a thread of journalism in there as well. I think it's, you quite often come back to your own, your own experiences, even if you don't, if you don't really mean to. Like in, I guess like every, people like Harriet Tice, who was, again, she was on my UEA course. She was a lawyer. She's gonna sort of draw on that experience. So yeah, I'm kind of interested in. I think it's it's just another way of doing an investigation, isn't it? Without the kind of the limitations of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. You can kind of in a way you can get away with more. You don't have the same access as a journalist. You can't force people to kind of relinquish evidence, but you can do it in much more of a sneaky way, which I think is kind of a lot more of a sort of you can be more creative, I think, in your investigation. So that's why I'm using that in my next book as well.
Oh, sounds really intriguing, because given that you were doing film and stuff, I just thought that different angle. So what kind of shows did you work on?
So my first few years were in investigation, like big, like international investigations. That was when I was kind of like more of a junior kind of level. So we did like there were investigations into things that were happening in Afghanistan before 9/11. Amazingly, it was such a long time ago. And then I kind of moved into consumer journalism, so things like Watchdog and stuff like that. People scamming each other, basically, ripping each other off. And then from there, I did so with like Watchdog, obviously there's quite a lot of undercover little stings and stuff like that. That's where I sort of honed my craft as a undercover researcher and undercover kind of director as well. Really, it was funny because there's something about wearing a camera that it's like acting, right? Because that your voice is being recorded and it's going to be, it can be used on TV and your producer's going to hear it and stuff like that. But you're the only one who knows that. And so all of the people that you're talking to. So, I did, for example, I did a investigation into the post office. So I'm there in a sorting office, working in this post office. We had these various we have to get evidence in first before we can go and film. It's part of the, it's a sort of the code of ethics and the law, basically, that we have to stick to in order to be able to do that stuff. But, I'm kind of asking all the questions and kind of, you have to, I couldn't go in there being a journalist, I couldn't go in there sort of like, being too savvy, too knowledgeable. And so I had to kind of put on this whole facade, and it was just, I loved it. It was it was just so much fun. But a lot of the people in my team just found it quite scary. Like, what if I get busted? What if someone finds out that I'm doing this thing and I'm not supposed to be here? And we did this one thing, which is, this is where I really can't cut my teeth in a way that I kind of realised that this was totally for me, where we'd had these complaints into the Watchdog office about people who had seen adverts for witch doctors, right? So in phone boxes and stuff like that, saying, do you want someone cursed or whatever? Like, are you in a marriage that makes you miserable? We can help you with that. So you phone these guys up, and they say, yeah, okay. So you you hate your husband, you can't divorce him, you know, come over to me and I'll, you know, basically put a curse on him and you give me £1,000. And we were like, well, this is ridiculous. Like, but you know, these people are preying on really vulnerable people, you know, people who are maybe trapped in horrible abusive relationships, or you know, or really bad people who actually do want someone killed. You know, this is quite serious stuff. But everyone else in my team is like, no way am I going to go and like trick a witch doctor. What if they curse me? And I was like, they're not going to curse you. Like, that's not going to happen. So yeah, I kind of made a name for myself, just kind of piling in there and going, well, I'm not. I mean, I'm not like a totally fearless person, but there are some things that I just know are nonsense, and that was one of them. And yeah, no, that was a great story. I loved working on that one. But I did have a slight problem in that, you know, you meet. I don't know if you've ever met anyone like this, but some people like can't wear watches, or you know, or various devices or whatever, because they kind of. It's almost like they kind of like. It sounds absolutely mad, but you can sort of some people like their watch will just constantly stop. I was the person with the undercover cameras who constantly broke them just by wearing them, and I was always going back to the workshop. And this guy Alan, who used to run the workshop of the specifically undercover cameras that we used in London, every time I walked through the door, he's like, "What have you done now?" And like they would catch fire. Like I once caught fire while I was wearing an undercover rig. And there was like smoke coming out of my jumper, and I had to go, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to finish this shift early. Like, it's completely ridiculous, and I don't know why it happened. It didn't happen to anyone else, but so yeah, maybe that was the fates telling me that I needed a different job. Yeah.
You must have come up with lots of different plot ideas from all those different experiences.
Yeah, you know, and I've this book now that I'm writing is the first one where I'm actually sort of specifically using undercover, because it just seems kind of obvious, really. Like,
Yeah.
it's when it's your life, it doesn't seem exciting, because actually the thing about undercover TV is that, especially if you're working on long form stuff, so a lot of it I was doing, you know, 8 months of a documentary. And you know, it would be edited down. Obviously, you'd end up with 48 minutes of TV for Channel 4, because obviously the ad breaks and stuff. And but it would take months and months and months, and it was dull work in the end. You know, you're just, you know, this is the thing. Like when I was working in children's homes, you're there shift after shift after shift after shift, just doing the work, the minimum wage work, and a lot of it is incredibly boring. You know, obviously at the same time, I'm trying to kind of get the information that I need to support the claims that, you know, for example, this you know, big children's home chain were you know, embezzling money, or you know, treating the children badly, or whatever the particular story was for whichever one I was in. But at the same time, you know, you really are having just to do the grunt work as well. So there's nothing, a lot of time there really isn't anything glamorous about it. So for quite a while I sort of forgot about it as a, you know, as a possible job for one of my characters, or a story to kind of, you know, something to base a story on. But you know, in the end I came back to it and I just thought, yeah, no, it does sound cool now. You know, I talk to my kids about it and they're like, were you really a spy? And I was like, I suppose, yeah, basically. Yeah, a spy on fire.
Yeah, so sounds like lots of, because not a lot of people are doing that yet. So I think
no, it's
there's a whole new genre for you, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
The only one I can think of is Hollywood, I think.
Yes, exactly. Do you know what? I've had To the Lions on my reading list for ages and I haven't got around to it. Have you read it? Is it good?
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
I bet it is. Yeah. Yeah, I saw her. She was talking at, I think it was Crime Fest that I saw her doing a talk at, and she was, you know, it was very impressive. Which was, you know, her her experience was quite impressive. So yeah, I should definitely get onto that one.
When you moved away from London to focus on
near Bristol, yeah, between Bristol and Bath.
Yeah, is that meant for different environments for that you could base your stuff on?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because with my I think I just moved when I was, because I'd written a couple of books before Lock Me In got anywhere basically, and I remember quite reading tweets or whatever from quite a few agents and editors saying they just really wanted more London-based books, and I was like, okay, I'll leave it in London, but after I'd been away for a little while, I kind of thought, well, I do want to, it feels a bit, it didn't feel kind of quite authentic, basing it in basing my newest books in a city where, I don't know it anymore. London changes so fast, and I felt like I wanted to sort of investigate a bit more, like, so I wanted to have, so in A Ruined Girl, I've got, it's based in Bristol, because it's quite a gritty, it's a really good city actually to have crime novels in. It's a great city for crime is basically what I'm saying. But yeah, no, I mean there are obviously there are quite there are Bristol based crime series, especially Mo Hader, so she's she's written quite a lot around this area. I haven't read anything of hers for quite a while actually. I think she's sort of had a bit of a hiatus, and I think she's coming back with something completely different soon. But yeah, no, I wanted to I think it's very helpful to be able to go to the physically go to the places that you're writing about, so that you can really get the atmosphere of them. And obviously being out here, having small children and stuff, there wasn't a great deal of opportunity to spend a long time in London. So yeah, it just seemed like the obvious place to move the last book. But yeah, the next one is set somewhere I've never been and probably won't be able to ever go. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
What's it been like researching somewhere you've not been then?
Kind of hard. It's been a lot of YouTube, a lot of talking to experts on the phone, and there hasn't it's yeah, I mean it's the next book is set on a boat, and I know a lot about boats because I lived on boats for 16 years, so I've got boats down, and there's also a TV show happening in the boat, so I know about the TV show aspect of it, but it's also set at sea, so a lot of that, the kind of the mechanics of it, the way that like how long how it feels to be at sea, how, like the temperature and the what the practical applications of that are, has been something I've had to kind of pretty much learn from scratch. But that's the joy of it, really. That's the joy of writing fiction, that you can completely immerse yourself into something, in the same way that if I was a sci-fi writer, I'm never going to go to space, but you kind of have to do your best with what you've got, really, don't you?
Writing on a boat, though, must be a completely different environment to what most people would expect, I imagine.
Writing on a boat?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really, I mean, like most sort of houseboats. I mean, mine was the last boat I lived on was a Dutch barge, so it's kind of like a big, wide, narrowboat, essentially. And it's really, once you're inside it, it's essentially just a sort of floating, slightly damp flat. So yeah, it was. It's I miss it. It was a lot of fun, and I think I often kind of end up with like Lock Me In, the main character. Oh, sorry, the missing character that the investigation is about in Lock Me In lives on a boat, so there's a whole kind of boat theme in that as well. But yeah, it's fun.
So did you manage to go all around the country while you were on the boat, or did you stay in one place?
No, sadly. So the boat I've lived on two boats. The boat I lived on in London was like like so small you couldn't believe how tiny that boat was, and it was on a sort of like what's called a semi-tidal mooring. So when the tide's out, so it's just off of the Thames in a little kind of basin off the Thames, and so half the time you're sitting on the mud, and half the time you're in the water, and it was just. I was working basically, and the engine, I would have gone about 5 knots. Do you know what I mean? So it was just, it was never really for the purposes of transport. And my second boat that I moved on to when I moved to Bristol was, it's an old 100-year-old sailing barge, but without a sail or a mast. So basically pretty much sat where it was the entire time. We had, we went out on rowing boats, and we were, you're quite close to your community. So You know, a lot of the
Yeah.
other people run like narrow boats and stuff, so we went on quite a lot of trips and stuff. But yeah, not not in my actual house. Far too stressful.
It just sounds like a completely different universe that but you've used it in your books before, and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, it is a different universe, to be honest. Like, you know, I remember when I first moved to London and having from Sheffield when I went to university there, and then moved down to London to live with my partner, and we had this tiny little bedsit in this kind of converted Victorian house, and I got there and I was just like, oh, like new neighbours, you know, like let's, you know, like immerse ourselves in the community. And I put a note through everyone's door saying we're going to have a little party, you know, on this certain evening, and we just sat there, you know, big bowl of punch and all this party food that we'd made, and no one came. No one came at all, and we just didn't make friends with any of our neighbours, and we really tried.
yeah,
On a moorings, you know, you live and breathe with these people, you know, partly because, you know, you imagine two boats next to each other, right, and you've got windows here and windows here, and you can just, you know, if everyone's curtains are open, you can see through the entire moorings, you know, if it depending on how they're set up.
yeah,
So we, you know, we lived in each other's pockets. It was a, you know, a genuine community in the truest sense of the world. And when you're living like that, it's quite it's going to influence, you know, everything about you, really. I think it's, you know, it's kind of like it is almost like living in a different culture. So yeah, and I tell you what, a massive shock moving off boats as well. Like I've been in a house now for 4 years and I am not used to it. I'm not used to the idea of just closing your door and then that's it. You don't really see your neighbours, you don't really speak to them all that much. It's kind of weird. Yeah.
it does sound very strange to be in a completely different place. But what's it
Yeah.
been like in lockdown? Because obviously, shut away from community anyway. It must be
Yeah, I
even with
mean,
it. Yeah,
yeah. So I've got two children. So mine are, you know, they were 7 and 10 when lockdown started, and you know, they go to state schools, so you know, there was literally pretty much no schooling at all for the first 4 months. You know, there was just some, you know, some worksheets they had to do. So basically, I spent my entire time with them. You know, they needed quite a lot of support and quite a lot of stuff to do. You know, they were bored. So there was a lot of that. You know, I live in a small town. I kind of know some people, so you know, we've kind of, you know, we go for walks with our friends, same as everyone else, really. It's just, you know, it's boring, isn't it? After a while, that's the thing. That's the thing. I think, you know, none of us realised, did we, at the
no,
beginning of it, that actually a pandemic sounds like, you know, not only obviously completely terrifying, but also really exciting. But it's dull. It's so boring after a while. So, yeah, it's what's interesting is how hard it is to kind of start talking normally to people in a group again. Like, you know, I went out with some friends for a drink like last week, and we were all like, how to do this? Like, we just find that, you know, were we talking too much or not enough, or sort of going off on tangents and stuff in like in the normal way. And yeah, I
yeah,
think it's going to take a little time to kind of, you know, settle back into, you know, normal communication in a way.
yeah. Because working on dialogue must have been difficult
Yeah.
when you're in lockdown and you're not seeing
Yeah.
people. Yeah,
Yeah, it's absolutely true, because a lot of the time, like I would, I wouldn't always work in cafes because it's quite expensive, but I would, you know, probably a day a week, I would sit in a cafe for hours and hours on end working. But you know, just being, you know, you do soak it up. You kind of you pick up. You're right, like dialogue. It's by osmosis. You know, you kind of you see how people interact, and it kind of makes you think, oh, maybe if I use that, you know, or the way that people look at each other. You know, the kind of it's expressions as well, actually, like remembering how people really do kind of communicate not just through words, um which, you know, I guess you can get over a lot in TV, but I don't really watch a great deal of TV. It's just basically
yeah,
the only faces I've been seeing are my children and my husband, and in the end that's not really enough. It hasn't been a particularly productive lockdown for me, to be honest. I'm just getting back into it now that they've gone back to school, so yeah, head down.
yeah. Thank, thanks for coming on tonight, and
No problem.
yeah, thanks for the book as well because it's really useful.
Okay, I'm glad you liked it.
My mum's was reading it after I finished it too. So yeah.
Great.
Um, when's the new one coming out? Have you got any idea? Right.
Well, no, probably sometime next
Yeah.
year. Haven't finished it yet,
Yeah.
so it'll be a while. But yes, I imagine it'll be sort of sometime sort of end of the summer, autumn of next year. Yeah. But we've got another anthology coming out for Halloween this year as well. So I think we'll probably maybe be doing another one of those into 2022.
Yeah.
As well. So keeping the pressure on for for the charities for that one. So the next one is going to be for Bernardo's, which is obviously close to my heart with stuff with children in care and stuff.
Thanks for doing this, and hopefully when the anthology comes out, maybe I can get a few of you to come on and we'll do like
yes, definitely, absolutely, that would be great. Yeah. I'm sure everybody would be very keen to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I look forward to it.
Yeah.